the Countryside Podcasts with Chris Skinner.
We're going to start this week's podcast with Chris Skinner in the woods. This is Fox's Grove once again. It's a beautiful blue sky, sunny day, but you wouldn't know, Chris, here, would you? Because now the leaves are fully out and the canopy has covered things over, and we've now got this very sort of darkish atmosphere in the woods.
Yes, the light level has decreased. It's really hard to get your head around what happens in woodland at this time of the year. Even the last trees to come into leaf, which are non-native ones, there's some giant towering sweet chestnuts just above our heads there. There's one that's a good 30 metres tall. It's just over the 100 feet tall. And they're one of the last ones to come into leaf. And in about a week's time, they start flowering with their catkins. And then somehow, by some miracle, they produce quite a good crop of sweet chestnuts down in this lower part of Fox's Grove. And I just noticed, hadn't seen it before, a woodpecker's hole just about 30 feet up on the trunk before the first main branches. That's a freshly excavated hole in quite a solid tree. I wouldn't fancy digging a hole in that.
Give you a headache, that would, wouldn't it?
I think it certainly would. But it's a fabulous piece of woodland. And on last week's podcast, we were only about 50 yards away from where we're standing because we discovered Fox's Earth over there. We can almost see it from where we're standing.
Lots of people have had a look at your video of those baby foxes. Well, 2 families worth, really.
Yes, there's 8, and I still think I keep getting glimpses of another one. It's a little bit shyer and a bit smaller than the other brothers and sisters. So I think there's a total of 9, which is very unusual, and they're still there, still very active, and their main diet, and I am still got the camera there, is grey squirrels. So some people will think, oh no, not squirrels, and some people will be rubbing their hands in glee. But it did cause a lot of controversy as well, and the amount of response and on the internet is absolutely incredible. On High Ash Farm Facebook, the video's still there, and I'm going to copy it over onto this week because in front of us is an enormous pile of sand. If we just walk in a little bit.
So this has all been excavated.
Yes.
By a fox?
Well, this is the mystery. It's pure yellow sand, another large hole there, and as we look through the woodland, this is one of the largest sets in this part of Norfolk. There are over 50 entrance holes, some of which we could actually get into. The holes are so large.
Don't particularly fancy it.
Right.
So we're talking about badgers here.
We're talking badgers, and we visited this site early in the spring because there was a lot of soil being excavated, bedding being carried about, and it's a sure sign. It was at the end of January, early February, I think, we did this particular spot, and I said, wow, that's a good sign because that means we got imminent cubs. And I've got the camera. It's been there last night on a little post, just standing there, trained over this set, and on this particular part of the set we've got 2 badger cubs, and on the top part of the set, which is about 100 metres away actually, there's a sow, which is a female badger, and she's got 4 cubs. So far we've got 6 cubs, and the set is kind of handed down generation to generation to the badgers, rather like you can inherit somebody's house, if you like. It's sort of their territory. I suppose they're, as I've said many times, they're the original landowners. They're a particular set of families. Mustele is the family name, and if you go back millennia, then they were very simple land-dwelling mammals, but they all had something distinctive because they all specialised in different ways. They have a gland under their tail, so they sort of scent mark everything. I suppose one of them developed as an aquatic creature, the apex predator, which is the otter. That's a member of the same family. And then you go down the scale a bit, the badger, obviously here, that's another member. Then we've got polecats, weasels and stoats, and they've all developed, they've all got this gland under their tail, and they've all specialised. So the pine marten, for instance, another member of it's like a trapeze artist. So they're all developed in different ways, and it fascinates me. But why I've brought you here is the camera that I'm using at the farm here is beginning to reveal things that I've never seen before. We saw the fox cubs nursing mum, 4 or 5 of which are not her cubs, and she's nursing them, full view of the camera, and I've got several videos of that now. This morning at about 4 o'clock on the camera, a female badger went in, the cubs had already gone down the hole, and 20 seconds later, wait for it, an adult fox went in as well. They're sharing this part of the set, badgers and foxes. The camera doesn't lie, it's all on the same video, which is quite short, 30 seconds long, and I've never seen that before, nor did I expect it. So,
and there was no standoff?
No standoff, and there's fox cubs playing on the same area that the badger cubs.
They coexist, in other words?
Yes, they do. I hadn't ever come across that. I knew over there where the 9 badger fox cubs are, that's a disused part of the badger set, but I've never seen another active part, and foxes are very welcome here. We don't do any control because I'm looking at biodiversity, the maximum amount of species that a particular habitat can support. And High Ash Farm has no problem. We've got a wealth of rabbits, and most of the prey that's being brought back are rabbits that have been either killed by the dog fox, who gently sort of brings them back, digs a little hole, and then buries them, and then the vixen will come to quite near the earth, and she'll dig it up and feed straight to the cubs like that. So there's a very sort of strict order, whereas the badgers, the cubs are now beginning to explore a little bit further away from the set, and their main diet is worms, so they don't kind of compete for the same food. And it's just wonderful to have this whole mixture that must have been here centuries ago.
But this large hole here,
Yeah.
though, Chris, if we were able to go down there, presumably there are chambers, and one chamber is maybe for the foxes and another chamber for the badgers.
Yes, that's a kind of labyrinth underneath when we're standing. If we just walk on a little bit.
It has been known that this earth collapses as well.
Yes, they can do. But that hole I could easily get into.
It's huge, isn't it?
Look here, right beside us.
That's cavernous as well, going right under the tree roots.
Yes, and so they're using the trees. You can see trails going off through the bluebells, which still have some flowers on them.
And Rat enjoys the scents as well.
He does. He's being very well behaved. You can see over there's monumental mounds, and some of those mounds contain 15 to 20 tons of soil, and I think if you've got a mobile camera on little wheels, there's well over a kilometre of earthworks underneath where we're standing. That's 1,000 metres. And the badgers are very powerful, short legs at the front, sort of cylindrical animals. Adult boar would weigh about 23 pounds, about sort of 10, 12 kilos, maybe a bit more, and the sows a little bit smaller, but they all do the same. They love excavating, and every few metres down these cavernous holes you have a passing place, so 2 badgers can go past each other. But what they do is scrub away to create new parts of the set with their front legs. They then reach forwards with their hind legs and kind of push the soil behind them, and then they'll use their bottoms and they bulldoze it out backwards. And that's why you can see these sort of just there behind you, you've got a perfect trail of where the soil's been brought up and dumped. But it's monumental. Just this part of the set we're standing on, which is occupied by the foxes and the badgers, there's probably 2-3 tons of sand here.
And they're down there now.
They are.
Below
but
our feet.
Probably some distance away from us, because you're probably right. The fox and the badgers are occupying different parts of the same set, but it's not really linked to the one that we looked at last week. This is a separate one. So, that was a roe deer. Big.
If you heard the barking, it's not rat.
No. There we are, way in the distance.
That's a roe deer.
It's a roe deer, a roe buck. There, just over that distance.
Because there is the barking deer, which is one of the introduced.
The monkjack, yes, and that sounds exactly like rat barking, and they sometimes bark at each other, but that's an introduced species. The roe deer, I call them fairies of the wood. That one's getting closer. It can almost certainly hear us or talking, and it's obviously setting up an alarm, and it's just walking through the undergrowth. We wouldn't be able to see it, although it's quite a large animal, so that's one of the British native species. That's what I mean by biodiversity. You get the habitat right. Oh, that's just wonderful. Honestly, it's not me with the recording in the distant woodland. That's the real thing.
And you consider how many roads there are now, how much development there is, and the British countryside can still support these large mammals.
Yes, absolutely, and I'm thrilled. It's kind of a new way of looking at the countryside, to appreciate all the different habitats that we have in the United Kingdom, therefore all the different parts that are suitable for different species, be it butterflies, bees, a woodland here for the deer, the badgers, the foxes, and it all fits together like a jigsaw. We're the awkward part in it. As you would see if you read the comments on the Facebook page, this is what's beginning to happen. It's just at its infancy for people who are interested in wildlife conservation, but I couldn't make it up. It's almost tearful. We're being sworn at. I wouldn't interpret it for you, because there are probably 4-letter words coming through the woodland at us.
Very close. Of course, we won't be able to see him probably.
No, he's in the nettles over there, in that ash grove over there. That's the lowest part of the woodland. There's a lot of sort of undergrowth there for it to hide in, but it's just absolutely beautiful. And what we're going to do now is move perhaps 10 steps, and I'm going to show you something even more fantastic. So here we go. Just walk over here.
Try not to fall down that hole.
Yes, exactly.
Roe deer still barking. And the bluebells, they're like an old Victorian lady who's maybe seen her best days.
Yes, they're just about finished their flowering period, but we're in the lower portion of Fox's Grove now. I can see a bee visiting one. That's a honeybee. But
there's still nectar for them, isn't
yes, there is, because this lower portion of the woodland has more moisture in it. It's some loamy soil here. It's still quite alkaline soil, because the chalk layer is only a foot or two beneath where we're standing. But I'm very remiss, because last week and the week before I said spring, particularly this year, is moving on at such a pace. I omit some of the stars of the show, if you like, in terms of conservation and history. And so we're looking at bluebells. Can you see anything else there? Poor Matthew.
Let's have a look here. Well, it's mainly
just
the
have
bluebells.
a look in the middle there. Something a little bit pink.
Ah, yes, here we are.
There
There's
we
another
are.
flower.
Yes, hands and knees.
Pink flower, not quite so high.
No, it's just about like the bluebells. It's slightly past its best. Nevertheless, the leaves are at the bottom, and that gives the game away. One of its nicknames is Bloody Butcher.
Aha, well, there's red blotches on those green leaves.
Yes, because it was meant to be drops of blood from Christ when he was crucified. That's one of its name. It's Orchis mascula, the early purple orchid, and it's one of we got 3 or 4 species of orchids on High Ash Farm regularly. So there's bee orchids, pyramidal orchids, And this particular one, the early purple orchid, comes and goes as its name implies, really early in the season. But the lower flowers are just about finished. There's 2 or 3 beautiful purple pink flowers, very demure down, and it's a little bit shorter than normal because in Shakespeare's, I think it was Hamlet, it's because we did the play at school, I had to learn some of the lines. I think it is Act 4, Scene 7, Ophelia drowned, and her body was draped in these particular flowers called long purples, and you'll see the reference in there in Hamlet. So a lot of history.
It's nice to have a Hamlet moment.
Yes, it is nice to have a Hamlet moment, but the scientific name orchis just means testicle, and if I was to dig this plant up, you would see what's called a double ovoid tuber, one of the little tubers slightly bigger than the other, and it's got lots of derogatory names. One of them sort of refers to it as kind of dog's testicles.
Close your ears, rat.
Yes, he's standing by us wagging his tail now with that. And the little ovoid tubers used to be dug up and dried and ground and used as an aphrodisiac because of their shape. A lot of our wildflowers are used because perhaps they look like something or smell like something, and it got into our local medicines that we use in the United Kingdom. So a lot of history there, but nevertheless it's called a common early orchid, but there's nothing common about it anymore because we've lost a lot of the areas of woodland. It doesn't just grow in woodland, it will grow on heathland as well if the soil alkalinity is at the right level. It does like lots of lime in the soil, so you won't find it on really acid heaths, but nevertheless it was common, now quite scarce. So before this, in next week, there won't be any flowers left on it, and it would have all been too late, and you wondered what I was talking about, apart from the little rosette of leaves at the bottom.
Well, we've got thousands of bluebell plants here,
yeah.
but very few of those.
The orchids are scattered all the way through, but rather than large masses now, they're becoming isolated, they're becoming individuals, just surviving, just kind of hanging on. So whether the climate has changed, whether it's the dry autumns we have when it's sort of finishing gathering energy from the sunshine, but they quite like the shade. We're nearly in full shade now. We've got sycamore fully in leaf above us. As I said, the sweet chestnuts, the ash trees are now coming into leaf as well. So as you rightly said, we've just got little areas of sunshine shining through the trees. It's very, very beautiful actually just to see individual areas of the woodland lit up like this. And then so we'll have the woodland butterflies quite shortly. Things like speckled wood will come out, and we'll be enjoying those in future programmes. And those seasons, or this particular season, is rolling on at such a pace. I do apologise because it should have been on last week's podcast at its height and its best. And in 1 week, it's a bit like me, it's beginning to go over like these bluebells. But nevertheless, they've been here thousands of years probably, because this area is just too hilly and too sandy to have ever farmed. That's why it's a perfect habitat, all mixed woodland, trees falling over, a sort of mishmash, but altogether it forms an absolutely perfect habitat with some of the lovely history of some of the wildflowers. So there you are, the early purple orchid, not common anymore, and lots of history with lots of Dog Stones was the correct name, that one of its nicknames, which is obviously referring to the shape of the double ovoid tubers down in the ground, storing the energy for next year's flower, we hope. I'll get you here next time on time rather than a week late.
Well, just memories of Skinner Maximus in a dusty old classroom some years ago, learning about Ophelia's long purples.
Exactly, and always the phrase comes into my head from my English teacher, Mr. White. Skinner, the blackboard is inside the classroom, not outside the window.
We're out of the woods now and in the bright sunshine. It's going to be another lovely day. This May really has been terrific, as long as you're not having to water crops.
It would be a task and a half at High Ash Farm, a square mile and sort of an inch of water a week. That would be absolutely colossal, but bearing in mind we are abstracting a huge amount of water from under High Ash Farm from the chalk. On the north boundary of High Ash Farm is an abstraction plant for Anglian water, and we're taking out well over 20,000 cubic metres a day for domestic use. So to put a reservoir here or to try and irrigate the crops would be absolutely impossible. It would overload the what's called the aquifer, with all the water within the chalk beneath us.
So everything has to go thirsty.
Yes, absolutely, yes. So this is why the farm is like it is, and we've got all these variable soil types. It is unusual for Norfolk because we're kind of looking at one of the valleys here and the hill each side of it. We're standing halfway up one of the hills, and there's a little stream running through that valley in front of us, so it's very verdant down there. You can see the green grass near the stream, and 100 yards away the hay crop is well, I think that's flammable.
It's not going to permeate uphill.
No, the water sort of always goes downhill. All the land drains were blocked up on purpose when I did the stewardship scheme in order to harvest the water to help recharge the soil aquifer back then. So it does put things under stress when you have these long dry periods which we're enduring at the moment. That's all farmers are talking about. You know what farmers are like, Matthew? It's either too wet, too dry.
I've never heard anyone say it's absolutely perfect.
No.
But you've got your lake down there that
Yes.
you excavated yourself.
Yes.
We've visited on many occasions,
Yes.
but that's doing okay. But I know that some of the ponds are starting to dry
the
up.
old natural ponds on the farm. I think there's a picture of one of the bottom of the pond on High Ash Farm Facebook, and it just looked like a desert condition. The soil is all cracked and you can walk over it. I mean, there's not an ounce of water there, but it does put everything under stress because the water level is in the soil is about what it normally is in August or early September each year. So it's that dry, and it's this earliness of the drought which is causing some stress. And we've got some trees beside us which I planted in about 1980, this avenue, because it's High Ash Farm, and ash is suffering because one of the trees there is dead, completely defoliated.
That's one of this line that you planted all those years ago. And most of them are still sort of thriving to some degree, aren't they?
That's right.
That one, though, is just a skeleton.
Yeah, it is, and several of them have died. And ash trees are intriguing because we've got a beautiful one beside us, now coming into leaf. It's one of the last native trees in the UK to what we call leaf out. And it's completely unaffected by this new disease. I can see one dead branch in there, but that could be natural because it's over 10 years now since we first had ash dieback come into the UK, and scientists were really worried and concerned about it. So they started what's called a national archive of ash trees, and we're taking part in that experiment. The local University of East Anglia, are doing research here at the farm and finding out if there are any resistant ash trees, because it was feared when we first discovered ash dieback, or Chalara.
There are many bird species on High Ash Farm, and Chris Skinner, that's one of them, isn't it?
Yes, very diminutive. Matthew, we're being serenaded by a wren.
Just one of the great delights of visiting the farm, but we need your assistance.
Yes, to keep us in fine voice, we need a few donations.
Any surplus funds to go towards the wonderful conservation work. To make a small one-off payment or a monthly donation, highashfarm.com/podcast.
Believe me, it's just a pure delight.
And that includes Jenny Wren.
Very fine voice. that it would completely wipe out all the ash trees. It was so virulent. But we're beginning to notice that some trees are showing some resistance, and so seeds have been collected from those trees and are planted and are growing away, and scientists are actually studying them really carefully to form what we hope will be a future seed bank in this National Archive collection. So doing all the research on it at the moment. But why I've brought you here, because we've driven down this avenue of ash trees, and I mark them each year, either male or female, and that's quite normal in some trees that you can have. Holly would be another close example, where you have a male holly and a female holly. Mistletoe, which we've visited before, you can have a male plant and a female plant.
Well, I planted an extra one for you in the monsoon.
You certainly did, when it was pouring.
That literally is the only rain we've had for many months.
That's right, yes, it has. But last year, this was an F. It was a female tree, and there's no ash keys on it this year. It's changed sex completely.
So when you see ash keys, that denotes a female tree.
And so on our right-hand side here, we can sort of walk up to this one, because some of the branches are quite low, and the keys, again, this is almost unaffected by ash dieback. And why I'm interested in ash, obviously it's high ash farm, and so I've learnt a lot about its history. And this is the time of the year that the keys are formed. They're called keys because they look like a little bunch of keys that you would carry on your belt.
If you had a large bunch of keys and just hung it upside down, that's what they look like.
Yes, it is.
So are they leaves then?
No, the keys which are... The leaves are just emerging. The keys are formed, and the male trees produce some pollen. We did visit those a month or so ago on the podcast, and you kind of have this coral red colour of the male flowers, and these are the female portion of it, which are now fertilised.
Do you want me
And
to
I'll
reach
just
up?
walk up. Yep, let's see if I can get
you've got it
first. And now we can have a close look, and you can see there's a bunch there, almost rattling, but they're bright green.
So are they pods then?
Yes, they're little pods. And you nearly fell into the blackthorn bush there.
That would have been fun.
And each one has a single seed in it, and I will take one off so we can examine it. Let's have a little pull. There we are, perfect. I'm going to let go of the branch now. There. Now, the seed forms in the base of the little thing, the little seedling, and you can see it's twisted. The little seed pod is actually twisted.
It's like an aeroplane propeller.
Exactly. So when the wind blows, it was very disrespectful, because a lot of foresters call it a weed tree because of this, because the seeds blow off anywhere, and if you get a bare patch in the woodland where some oaks have been felled perhaps, then you'll suddenly have thousands of ash trees, these tiny little seedlings, and they're the ones that seem to be most vulnerable to ash dieback. But this forms a little seedling, a little seed pod, and it's one of the favourite foods of our native birds, the nuthatch. And another one that comes across as a migrant is the brambling. It's a chaffinch-like looking bird, and they absolutely love these seeds. They take the little sheath off the outside, and they eat this tiny seed which is just beginning to form in the base of the seed. But these tiny seeds, well, the actual seed in there is under 1/8 of an inch long, although the twisted propeller-like one is about 30 mil long, just about an inch long. But I've never seen, well, I brought you here, I've never seen such prolific production of ash keys on a tree, and I'm wondering if it's a reaction to either the dry weather and the trees feel threatened, because there's very little soil moisture for them. Ash trees are unlike oak in that they're very shallow rooted. The roots go out almost horizontally along the ground for quite a considerable distance, and those growing in hedgerows are obviously under stress because the aquifer wasn't charged up properly this last winter for them. So if you threaten some wildflowers and some trees and plants, sometimes they react by producing an extra amount of seed, which takes a huge amount of energy for them. And so I'm wondering what's causing this rapid reaction to the conditions, whether it's a threat of disease or the lack of moisture. But anything but a weed tree, it isn't. It's really useful wood. In Nordic mythology, it was the king of all trees, actually, because the mythological ash tree reached up into heaven, and there was an eagle flying about taking messages down to the gods on the ground, or the gods up in the sky, and it's full of mythology. And ash wood is really, really useful as well. It's still used today in hockey sticks, for instance, billiard cues you can use it for. It's used, it's can absorb shock, and rowing oars as well, still often made from ash wood if they're not modern composite material.
This long line of trees, though,
Yes.
some of them are male, some of them are female,
Exactly.
aren't they? And they switch over.
They switch over. So some years a tree can be a male tree for 2 or 3 years running, and then all of a sudden it becomes a female. I've marked them, and so you can see why I've got very little hair on the top of my head. I've scratched my head so often, so I decided to put a little mark on the trees, on some of them. And look, in between the ash trees we've got a self-sown oak tree covered in what we looked at last week's programme.
Don't tell me. Oak galls.
Oak apple galls.
Apple galls.
Can you remember the date? Oak Apple Day is the
Oh, something in May, isn't it?
29th of May.
I remember it was Charles II.
Yes.
I didn't realise we were going to have to do an examination on the previous
Well, of
week.
course, yes.
Well, these ash trees are magnificent in this sunshine.
They certainly
aren't
are, and it's High Ash Farm, and we're on a high spot on the farm. So, one more quick stop, and then our questions are bursting out of the truck.
Good. Come to the other side of the farm now. Just passing a group of ladies doing their Nordic walking as well. You're not going to take that up, Chris?
No, but I will be needing sticks before too long, I think.
Right, don't
The
think
Anno
so.
Domino is catching up quickly now. Yes. Anyway, just a quick one, because we've been looking at the various tree species on the farm and how they all behave differently. Some beautiful beech trees right behind us, and these are the first trees I planted on High Ash Farm. Really difficult. I don't think I can get my arms around that. It's a beech tree, and it was in 1973. So all those years ago, and I can see 2 deer in the top corner. I don't know if they're roe deer. We're standing near Cantley Hill Planter. Can you see them just grazing right in the corner of the woodland?
It's in the shadows.
Yes, they're grazing the grass margin there, where the grass is still nice and green. Wow, I think they're roe deer. They're quite large.
We heard them earlier. We've seen them now.
No, exactly that. But the seasons move on so quickly, Matthew, and a tree that moves on quickly as well, it surprises everybody, are our coniferous trees. They have a very, very short growing season. This particular species is called Scots pine, and we're right on top of a hill, and I planted this row about 10 years ago now, mixed with some sweet chestnut on the end there, just coming into flower. They're about 7-8 feet tall, but at this time of the year something quite amazing happens. It's almost shocking. I'm just going to reach up to the top of the tree and lean it over. It should be quite flexible, and when you look at the top, there's in the last 10 days these huge kind of growths have appeared.
They look like cactus.
Yes, they certainly do, and it's this year's growth all happening in a very short period of time, because coniferous trees, with the long hours of sunshine in the summer but the long cold winters, mean they have to put on their growth spurts really, really quickly, and they will smell slightly sort of aromatic, and these are the new cones just beginning to form. Look, it's just finished flowering, and that's this year's pine cone, and that will stay on this little tree for about 2 to 3 years before they all drop off. So the mature Scots pines over in the distance, the cones are already dropping off, splitting open and letting the seeds either blow out or fall out onto the ground, ready to regenerate. And speaking of those deer, this is what annoys the foresters. Can you see the bark on the inside here this has been stripped?
There's been a bit of gnawing going on
yes,
there.
Yes, it has, yes.
You've got the bottom of the tree protected,
Yes,
haven't
I
you?
have. I put a guard round it, and it's now about 4 inches through the trunk, but it's still not safe. Now, if you sort of rub your finger on that little stripped bit, you'll find it's quite sticky. And then if you smell that, it's
this
this
is like
beautiful
the resin.
Beautiful pine smell.
Oh, that is lovely, isn't it?
It is.
It's like air freshener.
So it's one of those things, again, I said this year's moving on so quickly, but to see these sort of spikes out of the top of the Scots pine tree, it's really quite unusual how quickly they have to grow. So there's nearly 12 inches of new growth happened in 10 to 12 days. It's almost an inch a day.
And what are the red flowers at the top?
That is the flower. That is the actual pollen producing portion of it. And this tree, if we come back in about a week to 10 days time, there's some right beside us here. If we gave that a flick, the whole side of the tree will be white pollen, and it will spread off into the distance. So in places, on particular days at High Ash Farm, when we have the canopy of the Scots pine on hot, early sort of summer days, Rat has to be on every podcast one way or the other, doesn't he? The actual woodland looks as though it's on fire. You see this sort of smoke coming from the canopy, and that is all the pollen. That's why once we get to early summer, the hay fever season isn't over. It can be tree pollen, and Scots pine produce their pollen a little bit later in the year than many of the other species. So there we are. Matthew, it's question time. It has to be.
Order.
Yes.
Rabbits scurrying around. I think the deer have sort of gone in now. They are so timid, aren't they? Thank you for all your emails. Judith says, my partner and I really enjoy the podcast. We also enjoy walking around your wildlife-rich area. On a recent walk, I found a thin bone on the path with what seemed to be a perfect hole at the top near the joint. I wondered if this was a human-made adaptation or a natural feature. Have a look at the photograph there.
Yes, I
Chris.
did. It's quite difficult to actually ascertain which animal it's from. Originally, I thought it was a femur, but on looking at it, it's a joint bone. You can see where the sinew went round the top of the bone and through the hole. So it is natural. So still the jury's out a little bit, because I did wonder whether it was a wing bone from a particular bird, but on second thoughts, it really looks like the femur. With the ball and socket joint at the top. You can see where the sinew goes through and right the way round the bone.
The hole is natural.
Yes, the hole is a natural one, not man-made or anything like that. The only thing is, it's sometimes very helpful to have a scale, either a 10p piece, if you can afford it, or a 6-inch ruler or something like that beside. And it helps immensely in identifying a little bit more closely whose mortal remains they are.
Here's Lindsay Walker from the lovely Yorkshire Dales, and a photograph of some birds on the wire there, saying, I spotted these on a fence waiting to be fed. I think they're possibly sand martins rather than swallows. I was walking along the river at the time, the River Wharf near Grassington in the Dales.
Oh, wonderful up there. Yes. I had a look at the photograph, and without doubt they're sand martins. First glance, I did wonder whether they were house martins, all members of that same family, swallows, house martins, sand martins. But sand martins, early arrivals, I don't think they would be young birds. It would be slightly early for them to have fledged already. That's not impossible this year with the early season, but they're very distinctive, brownish, blackish bar across the top of the breast. Absolutely identifies them perfectly. So thank you for that picture. Really descriptive.
Lindsay's also been looking after one of her local hedgehogs here, And there's a wonderful photograph close up of a hedgehog, very thirsty, with a saucer of water that Lindsay put out. And she said, I wonder, Chris, if you could urge people to do the same and water the hedgehogs, because they must be desperate during this weather.
Yes, and hedgehogs need quite a lot of water, quite simply because the natural food that they normally eat is earthworms. That's the main diet, and an earthworm is at least 75-80% moisture, so they get a lot of moisture from their natural food source. And of course the worms in this part of the country where we've had little or no rainfall have done something unusual. They've what's called estivated, spelt with an A-E-S. They've gone down into the soil quite some depth, because earthworms can't dry out, otherwise they desiccate and die. So they have to go down to where it's cool and damp the whole time, down in their burrows at a great depth. And of course birds like blackbirds, thrushes, which will also eat earthworms, and particularly your hedgehog there, are desperate for them. And of course the molluscs are having a difficult time as well. The soil is so dry that things like snails and slugs are also having a difficult time. Gardeners will be rubbing their hand with that news, but when you consider it's a really important food source for many of our native species, particularly the hedgehogs, so water is absolutely crucial. And bearing in mind, over in the distance there, Matthew, is a newly planted hedge. And lots of county councils across this part of the country have done a lot of tree planting and hedge planting this spring, and it's absolutely crucial. It's easy to put a sapling in, or what we call a whip, which is a young hawthorn plant, but unless you keep the area underneath them clean, either by spraying or planting through plastic or by watering this year in particular, it's absolutely crucial, because all those young plants won't have developed a big root system and they will just die where they stand.
Finally for now, Chris Granger. Chris is a farmer, another Chris, Farmer Chris. He farms in Worcestershire, a very different sort of soil, I know, in that way, but in a similar way, he is bemoaning the lack of rain. And he says, it reminds me of this old saying, a farmer's heart is always in his boots, as the rain that's making his potatoes grow is spoiling his hay, and the sun that's ripening his corn is drying out his sugar beet. It's never quite right, is it?
No, it's never quite right. That's made me smile hugely, because it typifies farmers. But nevertheless, we're a very distinctive breed of people, getting quite rare now out in the countryside. Farmers, the number of farms and farmers and farm workers are decreasing. And so it's important we sort of keep smiling and keep, as they say in Norfolk, keep a throshin', because the climate is undoubtedly seeming to change dramatically, and it's putting farmers and what they produce, the food that we eat, under huge pressure. And we do need to grow local food in our country to save the imports and the air miles for everything. Rats looking very animated. 2 dogs have just walked past, and 2 ladies sitting on the seat there in front of us.
He's having to keep himself under control.
He has. He's just restraining a whole tirade of barking that's about to happen. So I think we should call it a day for this week's podcast.
Great fun as always, and keep your emails coming in. Just follow the link from the High Ash Farm website. But Chris will be doing it all over again next week as this quite astonishing spring carries on.
Yes, we've got dead hay all the way round us, look. And yet I'm still smiling because of the reward that biodiversity is bringing to the farm, and all the people that are here walking round the farm as we share the Norfolk countryside together.